Yeah, sorry for the delay, but we're going to continue on. I want to go through some more neurofeedback, and then I also want to discuss various things in the handbook and recommend that people get the e-copy, the e-book, because it's got a lot of information in it.
Is your microphone on?
It's on. Okay, that we looked at surface neurofeedback from 1 to 19 channels. That's standard stuff. What's different is that we used Z-scores, having the advantage of not being arbitrary, so that you can look at the essentially you're moving the brain towards the center of the healthy normal population. And it doesn't make any difference what the metric is. It could be phase, it could be coherence, it could be relative power, absolute power, all these different metrics. It makes no difference because they're all the same. They're all in terms of whether you're moving the brain in the direction of greater stability and greater health. By the Z-score, it's a single number. The Z-score is used throughout medicine for all kinds of things. And so if you want to learn more, you can go to our the articles part of scientific articles part of our website, and go to 36. That's by Joel Lubar and myself. And we go through how all these different Z-scores are used. They're used in blood constituent normative databases, MRI, functional MRI, positron emission tomography, ocular and retinal normative database, blood pressure normative databases, nerve conduction velocity, postural databases, bone density, all kinds of them. And if you go to this site here, under normative databases, you'll see there's quite a large number. (3,761 citations to normative databases. For some reason, the neurofeedback community just wasn't into normative databases for a very long time. And still, there's opposition to normative databases. Just recently, the last ISNR, it was just Brainmaster and myself that were doing normative databases. We're the only two. Everybody else is back to raw scores.
Back to what?
Raw scores. Yeah, and raw scores and no phase, no coherence. Theta beta ratio, yeah, they like that.
Theta beta ratio,
Yeah, that was the main thing there.
They didn't have the databases
peak
coming out of
concentration.
South Korea.
Oh, they did. They had a South Korea database which uses independent components analysis, and it's invalid. You cannot measure coherence and phase with the independent components analysis.
Is that the same one with the male and female differentiation?
Yeah, I think they have. It could be, but that could all be artifact. Here's a paper. If you go to our website, here's a tutorial on adulteration of phase relationships when using independent components analysis. Here's all these papers, and it's not me, I'm not an author, okay, showing distortion of phase and coherence in any conductivity if you use independent components analysis. Essentially what's going on is you got 19 channels, let's say, and you got two that are, or four, the FP1, FP2, and F7, F8 with eye movement. And then you got T3 and T4 with muscle. So you got 6 channels. What you do is you subtract 6 or 19, those 6 channels, and you just use the 13 channels, and omit the frontal lobes and the temporal lobes and anything like that. And then with those 13 channels, you create a new time series that has 19 channels. It's not channels, they're just 19 squiggles. But it's now not the patient's EEG.
No, kidding.
Yeah, it's independent components analysis. So it's just not the same. And then they discard the patient's EEG, and they don't even tell the patient that they're working on something that's not them. So that Japanese group, that's what they do. They go against the scientific literature. And the reason they came to me initially, very friendly. They wanted me to consult with them because they're going to build a database and a whole nice thing, right? I said, great. Then they met with Jay Gunkelman. Jay Gunkelman flew over there and everything and told them to use the WinEEG method of independent components analysis. So they adopted it for their entire database. Now, the bad thing about that is that if you got subject A, you get his EEG, you do the independent components analysis, and then you get another time series. And then the next day you do it again, and it's different than it was yesterday. You do it again, and that's different than the 2 days before. So there is no real stable relationship between the squiggles and the patient's brain. This is what these papers show.
Are the patients getting better?
Nobody knows. They just started.
They're using their method to also just differentially diagnose dementia. They're using those principal components to extract, to check your EEG and give you an indicator, just like our dementia.
Yeah, but it's
That's the only thing they're interested in.
just dementia, because they have it themselves.
Yeah. Because I went through their whole system and talked to them and everything and got myself recorded, and the artifact control is bad, everything.
Well, yeah, and it's not you. I mean, and dementia, and there's different kinds. There's multi-infarct dementia,
Yeah.
there's Alzheimer's, but we can see it. You know,
It's just a measure of how the probability of you're going to be demented based on their measures. They're independent components that they extracted from the EEG.
well, anyway, if you read this, here's experts from UCLA. If you remove independent components and reconstruct channel EEG by back projecting the remaining independent component, of course, it changes channel EEG phase. These are the people who actually developed it was for evoked potentials, though, not EEG. And NITSAR in Russia decided to use it with EEG, and now they're using it, but mostly as just evoked potentials, where you don't care about coherence and phase with an evoked potential. You're just looking at the peak amplitudes. But even that, at NIH, we looked at it, we could see there's distortion of the time of the peak by the independent components analysis. But anyway, these are experts. All of them saying independent components analysis is bad. And here's a tutorial you can use if you want to verify that. And then we also published a paper. And I submitted this paper to the Clinical EEG Journal. And the editor, who's in love with independent components analysis, rejected it out of hand. So we had to turn around and submit it to this journal, Journal of Neurology and Neurobiology. And we compare. We also, with NeuroGuide, we try to get a bell-shaped curve. So we do transforms so that the statistics make sense. So when you do a Z-score, you really need a bell-shaped curve. It can't be flat. Huh?
Gotta be Gaussian.
Yeah, it's got to be Gaussian. That's what a bell-shaped curve is. And so we have a program where we put in different types of transforms. Here, this happens to be no transform, but we put in try a whole bunch of different ones, and we use those that give us scores here where skewness or kurtosis. This is 0.5, 0.3. So it's a bell-shaped curve, and So independent components analysis is also not invertible. That is, if you keep all the independent components, say of 19 channels, 19 independent components, you can actually reconstruct the original data. All that information is in there. But if you remove some of the independent components, then it's non-invertible. You can't go back to what the original was. So we describe what it is, and then we compare non-ICA with ICA, and you'll see that these values of phase are totally different for these. It's the exact same moment of time, but these numbers are all different. We removed, I think, FP1 and FP2, and then we created 13 channels. Another example. Every single value is different. So it's not the same person. And there's no artifact, really, in these parts of the record. But every single data point is not the same. And then we did t-tests between independent components analysis pre and post, and they're highly significantly different. So I thought it's worthwhile to note, if you want to learn about the normative databases, let's see, where is that? History of scientific standards. We'll go through the whole history of normative databases, what the standards are, how they evolved, and if you need to, and I put out here, don't use ICA or principal components analysis. If you want to learn about that history, if you ever have trouble getting third-party reimbursement or anything like that, well, you can use this science to help you. So let's take a look at S-Loretta neurofeedback. You do the same thing. You got phase shift and phase lock, phase differences, coherence, and power. You go create a symptom checklist match. That is, you first run the patient's data through NeuroGuide and save the symptom checklist match. When you go to report symptom checklist match. It's got to be artifact free. You first remove any artifact. And then, let's see if I got any. And we'll look at anxiety again, but now it's inside the brain. It's actually the Brodmann areas. Let me do that again. And I'll look at a different one. Say you can go by symptoms, you can go by independent components analysis. And that is not, it's independent. I'll go check my books. This is not independent components analysis. It was developed by summarizing about 30,000 PET scans and SPECT scans. And it showed, in this paper, it's on my handbook of QEEG, the way that there's huge consistency in these 30,000 subjects with the dorsal network, the cingulate gyrus, the hippocampus, everything that's consistent across all, including EEG and MEG. But they came up with these intrinsic connectivity networks, they're called. And so you can use them if you want. It's got a really strong PET relationship. And then you have the attention network. Here are the neuropsychological tests. Here's agnosia for social emotion. for example. It's right hemisphere. This comes straight out of the neuropsych literature. And then, of course, we got networks, but the Department of Defense at Fort Campbell, they use this particular menu because these soldiers have attention problems. They have pain, chronic pain, mood disorders, concussion, PTSD, and sleep problems. And then this is the Neuralink I showed before. You can import the test results that somebody takes on the app, and then from that, create a protocol.
How do you load that? I haven't used that yet.
It's on a smartphone, and we also have Neuralink. You have to download it and run it, but you can do it on a smartphone.
But can you show us how to load it?
Let me see.
If that's not appropriate.
Yeah, it's pretty fast. Let's let me go on first, but later I can show you. So we're in S. Loretta neurofeedback, and we already selected a network. So everything is the same, except now you're doing neurofeedback from Brodmann areas, center voxel of these Brodmann areas. Now you can also hand select ones that you want. For example, you can hand select these. And so there's a lot of flexibility. I got it on ZTunes, but you could use all or none. With that one, that means every single metric at every instant of time has to be below threshold. So if you set it at 3 standard deviations, otherwise there'll be no feedback signal. In contrast, ZTunes is 80% have to be 70 or 80%. 70, yeah. I think 70 has to be at threshold. And the other 30% have to be moving in the direction of Z equals 0. That's ZTunes.
And for those of you working with patients, when you change the threshold in ZTunes, there's a 10-second delay while it calculates the movement. And some of the clients pick up on it. So we try to.
With ZTunes, yeah.
Yeah, there's a 10-second delay where there's never a reinforcement
Yeah.
while it's recalculating.
Yeah, well, it has to calculate the history.
Right.
And then it's looking at the history every instant of time, and the Z-scores have to be going in the direction of Z equals 0. So it's got to have it takes time to calculate the history.
It's not a big deal. It's just sometimes you wonder, oh, did I do something wrong, or did I lower the threshold too much?
Yeah,
And you have to wait.
you got to be patient. So go to the symptom checklist that we created in NeuroGuide. We'll take a look at dorsal attention network, which is here. And these are the Brodmann areas that are significantly deviant, or no, not significantly deviant, but they are the Brodmann areas for that. So this is too slow, so we don't use it here. For that symptom. And so some of them are significant, some of them are not. So we're going to find out what it is. You can set up session rounds. You can have a 30-second delay between, right now it's set up for 5-minute rounds. And after 5 minutes, there's a 30-second delay. So it allows you to talk to your patient, or you can pause it too. And then it starts up again. And in this case, it'll be 8 rounds. And then you can look at the progress.
Now,
So
typically, do you recommend a full 40 minutes or
20 minutes. And it's hard, a lot of people get fatigued if it's too long. So you can see it, as Bill was talking about, it's flat because it's calculating the history and then determining whether it's moving in the direction of greater stability or efficiency. And it's the same thing. And you can use a lot of different displays. This is the CZ head. You can use a DVD player, multimedia player, but also this is great. It's called the ANI Streamer. It's an add-on that allows you to use DVD, well, it allows you to use Netflix, YouTube channels, pictures of your child when they were 10.
I used to once have my son read text and modulate it while I was training the attention network.
Uh-huh.
He was doing his homework, modulate.
So it's really universal. It's good to use the ANI Streamer. Any movies, anything you want, you can put it in. And then you can actually use that progress chart and multimedia and various things. And then, of course, you can use sound as well as the visual. And you move that to the patient. And then you look at their progress. You can see the variables that are deviant from normal. It's alpha phase. There's coherence, Robin area 19 and 30 on the right. So you can see which ones are deviant. And you can also see how many feedback signals you got in 1 minute. Well, actually, that was 3 minutes. So divide that by 3, that's 22 or so. You don't want too many feedback signals in 1 minute. You would like, if you have 60 in 1 minute, that means every second you're getting a feedback signal. That's too much. You want the brain to be in control. And so typically what we do is you set the threat, you got the patient's EEG often before they come in for their session, or if they just come in, it's the first time, go through their EEG one time with this and see where the threshold should be set. And so it could be 4 standard deviations, 3 standard deviations. And because you want to have maybe 20 in a minute. You don't want too many. So if it's
12 to 20
30,
is your sweet spot.
pardon?
12 to 20 seems to be the sweet spot.
Right, 12 to 20 is the sweet spot. And so they'll go from 12 to 15 to 20 to 25 to 30. Well, then you raise the threshold, you knock them back down to 12. And then they'll start, as their brain starts learning, they'll get from 12 to 15 to 20 to 25, knock it down again. I mean, raise the threshold. And you'll get a sawtooth shape to the reward signal. And you'll be marching the brain towards the Z equals 0 in steps.
And then symptoms no longer show up
Yeah.
in the match.
Yeah.
Remarkable.
I have a question. Is there any particular advantage or disadvantage to training Hagman modules as opposed to more specific network like anxiety?
Well, you want to match the patient's symptoms to the networks of the brain. Now, the Hagman includes all of the networks. Okay, so it's a higher order network. It just has 6, I think. I forget the number. And you get a larger universe, but it's not as specific to one particular symptom. But you certainly can do that if you want.
Randall Lyle's question.
You what?
Randall Lyle's question.
Okay, Randall. And trying to link the patient's symptoms to networks in the brain is the goal. And it happens to be that the Hagman hubs are a very high order network. So now we got the number of rewards in 5 minutes. You can see what that is. And you want them to, again, not be this fast. And it's going to start up again in a minute. Now, you can also look at the absolute values in which you'll need to raise, because we were looking at averages, but these are instantaneous z-scores. And you just want to knock those down by only reinforcing them when they're going below threshold. Threshold right now is at 2. And this patient is in bad shape, so we'll have to change the threshold. Just come over here and put the threshold at 5. So now you're trying all these particular metrics are greater than 5 standard deviations, and you want to move them below 5, and then you go to 4, and then you go to 3, try to get down to 2, and that's how you do the neurofeedback. So I'm going to then you close, and it's a good idea to save your session data, and you can save it in this format. It's a Loretta neurofeedback file, and you can also save it as text. And it's got the whole session. And then with that, let me see. There's displays you can use to evaluate how the brain has changed. Now, SW Loretta is here. It's the same thing. The format's the same, so it's not complicated. And we'll look at the anxiety network. And the z-score is set at 2. So it goes the same way. And this is the power that's deviant. There's coherence, lag coherence, phase. It's a list of the variables. And there's, for example, in alpha, there is, or theta, let's do all of them. Alpha 1. There's 203 metrics are selected. So they're all at the same time. And it's the same concept. So you can change the scale and look in more detail as you're moving the brain in the direction of greater health. So the format is the same. In the future, we'll have a phase shift and phase log. Currently, we only have these 4. And we also don't have effective connectivity here, phase slope index, but we'll be having those in the future. And in the demo, you're free to play around with this. I'm not going to save it for now. Now, another one is the SW Loretta cross frequency. We may not, that's probably not working yet. Carl's working on that right now. But we do have the surface cross frequency. Now the question came up about what's the use or validity of cross frequency. Let me bring up here one of our, what's good about it, or
In which case would you use cross frequency versus SW lower than your feedback? That was the question.
okay, this is surface, but in the future it'll be SW. So there's a difference. First of all, anytime you use SW neurofeedback, it's no matter what you're doing, it's much better because you have more specificity. In the handbook of QEEG, let's see if I can find it. So, you can learn about the differences. And I'll go through that a little later, but so you always want to try to work at the level of the Brodmann areas because that has more specificity. So let me look at EEG biofeedback, specificity and good clinical outcomes with fewer sessions. So the more specific you are, then the greater the efficacy of your neurofeedback, because you're targeting the part of the brain that's not working right. So if you're not specific, then you're not. It's going to take 100 sessions. When I first went to ISNR meetings, they were 80 to 120 sessions, and they weren't getting any third-party reimbursement for that. They had a really bad reputation. And sometimes they're going 2 years. You know, there's all kinds of reasons why somebody would change in 2 years. But as soon as you target that amygdala or that hippocampus, if somebody has a memory problem, then it's fewer sessions because you're more specific. So specificity is one of the principles of neurofeedback. So in the handbook, which you can download and will give you a key, you can look it up and learn about why specificity is so important and how to link symptoms to the brain. I was showing this earlier. This is the.
So does that specificity mean practically, if you have symptoms, then you can kind of see where the networks are?
Yeah, which hubs are.
And then you're basically, let's say you use SW Loretta to see these scores of 2, and you have a protocol that might be 6 networks or something like that. But when you look at symptoms, you go, well, really, 3 networks would really hit the vast majority of the symptoms. So you think you get better results.
It's really, if you can, just do one, say it's an anxiety problem. Go for the anxiety network. You don't have to do 3 networks, just the anxiety network. The anxiety network has 12 Brodmann areas. Okay? It's spread around the brain. If it's an attention problem, then you go for the attention network. If it's a, balance problems, you go for the cerebellum and the sensory motor cortex. So the more specific you are, because these networks are linked to different functions, different problems that people have.
And is it easier for people to learn?
It's identical.
Networks?
Yeah, and it makes no difference.
It doesn't make a difference the number of networks in terms of.
Well, it's best to use one network, but it's okay. You can do 2 networks. Say they have anxiety. A lot of the people have attention problems where they have anxiety because they have an attention problem. Okay? They don't want to get discovered by somebody, and so now they have anxiety. So you can choose. I'm going to go for the attention network. Do 3 sessions on that to see if it improves, and then do the anxiety network, or you can do both. So the key to it is linking specifically the symptoms to the hubs in these networks known to be related to those symptoms. It's the same in like I showed you in the Z-scores in medicine, in blood analyses. If you see elevated cholesterol is one, but that's everywhere. There are sometimes there's blood constituents that are deviant, and it could be the spleen, it could be the different parts of your body that are causing this particular thing, but you know you've narrowed it to those organs. Now the doctor will evaluate you more specifically to find out, is it the liver, is it the spleen, is it something in the intestines? Once they get that narrowed, then they can help you. And so it's a similar process. Now this is Neuralink in a smartphone. And so this is the general theory of neurofeedback. And these are the specificity, contiguity in time, strength of the feedback signal, and predicting a future reward. These are the principles of biofeedback. Have been developed for decades. So you want it to be specific. You want it to be contiguous in time. You don't want to wait for a day before you get the feedback signal. When the brain moves in the right direction, you want to give them, right now in NeuroGuide, you have an option. I'll just take a look at it. Oh, I got cross frequency going. You can make, this is 250 millisecond window. About 3 seconds, 250, 50 milliseconds, 75 milliseconds, 1 second. That is the time between when the event occurs and the reward signal is delivered. So you don't want it less than 250 milliseconds because the brain's phase shift and phase lock take 250 milliseconds. So you want to really go after phase shift and phase lock.
But I've never seen patients able to hold it for a second, for example.
No, it's very difficult. Yeah. But if you can get them out there, they got a very stable brain. In other words, the chaos has been minimized.
But in practice,
Yeah. Well,
they get
Joel,
frustrated, or they,
oh yeah, I agree. Yeah, Joel Lubar uses it. I don't know. He wanted to go out to 3 seconds. As a Joel.
I'll go to a second.
Yeah.
Probably 90% of my people.
Yeah, by the time you get.
Start at 250 and then you work.
Yeah,
your way up.
250. It's more difficult to do
And then
1
you-
second.
You know, increase the difficulty of
Yeah, that's usually where you get down to about a Z-score of 1, but you want to keep training to open up the time. You know, you stay in that state longer.
And so this is cross frequency. The question came up is, well, first of all, you can't mix apples and oranges. You got to really look at either the surface or the sources, and it's always better to work at the level of the sources. Now, what's the advantage of cross frequency? Well, the amazing thing is that that's how the brain works. In the handbook, I go through that in great detail. For example, if you look at with microelectrodes in the cerebral cortex, you'll see that the upper layers 1, 2, and 3 are primarily cortical connections. And they operate at very high frequencies, at beta and gamma. And then layers 5 and 6 are in theta. And all the frequencies are there, but they're pretty dominant in that lower layer. And layers 5 and 6 give rise to the axons, to the output of the cerebral cortex. So they're sending information down to your cerebellum, your limbic system, to the whole rest of your brain. And then those parts of the brain come back up to the upper layers of the cortex in gamma. So cross frequency is very important because you got both theta and gamma doing somewhat different things because the limbic system operates in the theta band. Primarily, it's very dominant in the theta band. Neocortex is especially high frequency because of the cortical connectivity in the upper layers. So the advantage of doing cross frequency is you're linking this whole dynamic of the neocortex being related to the limbic system and the subcortical structures in a healthy way because they're talking to each other in the theta and gamma frequency bands primarily. Yeah, some delta too, and the reticular formation generates delta. And that's why when you wake, you go to sleep, you wake up, and delta is extremely important because if you, in my handbook, I really recommend people read it, get it. I go over this concept of 1 over F, 1 over the frequency. And that turned out to be very important. And the cross frequency dynamics is now dominant for grant applications and research at the National Institutes of Health because it turned out to be so important, the cross frequency is. That's because that's how the brain works. So that's why it's good to use it. And we also have phase and amplitude coupling. And if you go into the literature, you'll see that's another way that's unique because this is cross frequency neurofeedback, and that's also very popular at NIH, where you look at both the amplitude and the coherence of coupling between different frequencies, essentially, theta to beta.
And you have to specify which region
Yes,
is correlating with which other region.
right. You still have to be specific in space. That's the key. Specificity of the neural event. Right? In the future of biofeedback of all types, specificity is important. The contiguity window is important. It can't be too long, like what we just discussed. And you need a very clear feedback signal. And it's got to predict the future reward. There's where dopamine comes in. Dopamine modifies the size and number of synapses. But if there's no prediction of future reward, it's just, and people sometimes make an error. They have a kid come in and say, okay, look at this screen, and I want you to make the dot go on or the train move or whatever. And then they leave the room. And the kid goes, God, this is boring. But somebody else will come in, like Joel does, and says, you see the candy bar on the shelf up here? You get 10, 30 rewards, you bring your Z-scores down, and you get that candy bar and some popcorn over there. And so they got a reward to think about. And now they're motivated. Or you're going to get better grades in school. Your parents are going to be proud of you. You'll be successful in your, as you get older, you'll get a good job, be able to raise a family. There's a lot of incentives that practitioners should give as predicting a future reward because it's been shown that's absolutely essential. That's what dopamine's all about. And dopamine is the one that's changing the synapses. So you can.
And social rewards are.
Social rewards are important. If you want a girlfriend, fix your brain.
I mean, but the therapist encouraging the patient, hey, I told you can do it.
Yeah.
They'll work for that.
Yeah. So you can. Now, this is looking at phase shift and phase lock, which is very important because that's the recruiting process. And you can see here's phase lock. Now, if you just look at the EEG, you don't know if there's phase shifting or phase locking. But when it's rhythmic like this, that means there's phase locking. Now they get out of rhythm and there's a phase shift and phase lock. And so what we're doing it goes down to this preconscious period. There's a phase shift in recruiting neurons and a phase lock, but that's the underlying physiology. But you can reinforce phase shift and phase lock using a Z-score, a normative database. Really, it's important to be able to lengthen the duration of the phase shift and shorten the duration of the phase lock. And the other thing I was mentioning is that Z-score biofeedback is an automatic artifact rejection. It's one of the great positive things about it. And this is a contiguity window. And what we're really trying to do is to minimize unstable and inefficient networks and move them in the direction of greater efficiency. And this is complex demodulation where you calculate things in real time. And this shows us this is coherence and phase. That's calculated by two different channels. This could be O1 and this could be P3. I don't have to go into the details of the math. But what we do is if we use the FFT, all we're doing is we're taking the mean of the normal population, subtracting the subject's value from the normal population, and dividing by the standard deviation of the normal population. That's the equation for z-scores. But for instantaneous z-score neurofeedback, so the FFT takes 2 minutes. You can't use the FFT for biofeedback. It's too long. And essentially, it was invented by Joseph Fourier in the early 1800s. But essentially what it is you take 2 minutes of EEG, or whatever, say 2 seconds, anyway, whatever it is, it's a long period of time. And the computer wraps the end of, let's say 2 seconds, the end of the 2 seconds around to the beginning of the 2 seconds. And it goes around several million times. And that's why it takes time to calculate the FFT. And the other thing about it is that you have to taper. If you have a 2-second window, it has to match. What you do, you have to set the beginning to 0 and the end to 0. And when you connect them around in a circle, there's no artifact by virtue of that. So our NX link is one where they take 2 seconds, and you could have a real high positive wave at the beginning of the 2 seconds and a low or a negative wave at the end of the 2 seconds. And when you wrap them around, you got a big discontinuity there. It interferes with the whole spectrum. So you have to do what's called tapering. You always have to do that with FFTs. And I wanted to show, I wanted to show the, so this is the handbook. This, by the way, when it comes out of NIH, when we were looking at all these different imaging modalities, and the advantage of EEG is it can be a millisecond, or very, very fast, and you can measure EEG for a whole night. And the spatial resolution is about 3 centimeters. Functional MRI, under very special circumstances, like if you're moving one thumb or one finger over a long period of time, do a lot of averaging, you can get down to about 0.5 centimeter resolution. And the PET is a little bit more than that, but nothing in the brain is happening. That's 1 millimeter, 3 millimeters, 5 millimeters. It's in centimeters. So the EEG has sufficient spatial resolution and temporal resolution, whereas functional MRI, it's a minute or 2 or 3 minutes before you get anything close to valuable. And in my book, it turns out there's billions of dollars have gone into functional MRI and not an EEG, okay? Because you got to get this big magnet, and you've got to have liquid helium. Liquid helium is $20,000 a month. It's not portable, but people do it. And so they poured all this money in, and then after about 20 years, this guy went through the whole literature and could not find any consistency across thousands of papers. And he wondered why. And the reason why is because the brain is pulsating like mad inside there. And it's full of artifact. Functional MRI is full of artifact. And so a very small percentage were able to actually replicate each other. And so that was a big controversy. And, people now, I go through it in the book. And there's multiple people that have been able to find that.
Well, the other thing is that all the other functional imaging methods are proxy measures. They're either sugar or they're oxygen or they're blood flow.
Right.
But they're not neuronal activity. They're assumed to correlate with neural activity.
Yeah.
But that's an assumption. EEG is neurons firing in synchrony.
Yeah.
Yes or no?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Not only that, but in the book that I edited at NIH, one of the authors is a specialist in the control of blood flow. And he did radioactive tracer stuff. And what happens, neurons get active and they talk to each other in 100 milliseconds, 300 milliseconds, and then it's over. And then the next window comes in, 500 milliseconds, 300 milliseconds. But there's no change in the blood flow. There's no change. It takes a lot. You got to do a task over and over again. Now you start to see a change in the blood flow because we actually all the time have a surplus of oxygen in our blood for the brain. There's plenty of oxygen. So you don't actually put a burden on the oxygen without doing an arduous task. EEG, you don't have that problem. And so that's another advantage because it's operating in milliseconds and very efficient. So when the neurons get, they start making demands, they send a signal to the glial cells. The glial cells then dilate the artery and blood will flow. But even worse with functional MRI, that's PET scan. So you got oxygenated blood coming in, okay? And it still has this huge lack of connection to the neurons. So blood comes in to, make sure that the neurons are operating after they've been tasked. And it's fairly spatially localized. You get pretty good localization, like that paper I showed you. I didn't show you the MRI, but I will. Then with the sources. But functional MRI is the deoxygenated blood, the blood that's already been used. It goes into your veins. And there's a big difference between oxygenated blood, which is very specific, and deoxygenated blood, because it goes a whole bunch of little tributaries and it flows down to go back to the heart, but some distance away from the active neurons. That's what happens with functional MRI. So it's not even related to the Brodmann area that's important in that given function compared to the PET scan. Now, this is a type of cross-validation where we looked at, this is the Hagman hubs. We were talking about earlier, somebody wanted to do Hagman hubs. So these are the 6 Hagman hubs, and you can download the Hagman paper and read about it. And it was surprising to know that 100 billion neurons are actually organized in 6 clusters. These are the clusters. And so I was amazed by that. So I looked at what that meant. Let's see if I got it here. Oh, I don't. So what we did, I'll try to find it, is
it's in the handbook, I'm sure of it.
Yeah, this is the handbook. I just have to find it. This is functional MRI, but it's done correctly. And these are the kinds of networks that are in the brain, and it's very important. And you got the Ridge Club, and you got feeder hubs. The Ridge Club is which you just saw with Hagman. So what we did is we identified where all of the Hagman hubs are. I don't think I can do a search on here. Let me see. Well, I did. See, it keeps going up now. It's got 66. So, yeah, got to close that door. So this is it here. So you saw the Hagman hubs. So what we did is we went to the paper and we looked at the hubs. There's 6 different clusters in the brain. These are the super ones, really high, powerful, integrated ones. And then we measured EEG at the Hagman hubs. And we looked at the center voxels of each of the Hagman hubs, and we were able to replicate the Hagman hubs using EEG.
Yeah, I have it here. It's in the slideshow for this weekend, in the stick that you sent around.
Okay, that's not my book though.
No, but it's,
So, yeah,
it's in the slideshow. If you wanted to open that PDF up, it's like the 56th slide, 57th and 58th.
in mine.
In the energy workshop 3-5-23.ppt file.
Okay. But
Right
this,
before there.
yeah, this is a replication of the Hagman hubs. Here's Hagman here, here's Loretta there.
And
And
that's the next slide in the show.
yeah, and so we were able to replicate all of those hubs using EEG. And you could do it you didn't have to do any averaging. A single subject is like 90% accurate. So that's another example of the power of quantitative EEG and source localization, because it replicates the Hagman hubs. And it is linked very nicely to diffusion tensor imaging, which is a measure of the flow of water in the axons, because the axons have myelin around them, and so water does not flow at right angles through the axons. It goes mostly through, it goes straight through. So diffusion tensor imaging involves looking at the water that's moving at right angles to the axon versus the water that's in the plane of the axon. And it's that ratio. And that's what's used to trace out the white matter. And it's used a lot now in the court of law. And Richard Adler, he's a psychiatrist who spends a lot of time testifying in court. And he combines Loretta, the neuronavigator, with the diffusion tensor imaging, and he gets EEG admitted all over the United States, if not the world. And one of the things that we can see is looking at source correlations, because what we used here were source correlations. Just the correlations between, here's the cuneus, and here's the posterior central gyrus. And these are all regions of interest in the brain. And there's frequency on the x-axis. And we're looking at the correlation. And essentially what's going on, there's all these U-shaped fibers, and there's local U-shaped fibers, and then there's the long distance fibers. And so you can see both long distance and short distance. And this is the section on all the various kinds of inverse solutions. There's a lot of different ones. And their accuracy, that I presented some of that earlier. And then SW Loretta. And you've seen all this. And there's the phase slope index, which is looking at the magnitude of information flow. That's what it does. And one of the things we found is that we looked at high IQ and low IQ and middle IQ subjects. And we found, contrary to what I didn't know, we had made hypotheses but we didn't know it would come out the way it did. And what we found is that the lower IQ subjects have more information flow than the high IQ subjects, but the information flow is long distance. So essentially what's going on is the lower IQ subjects have to use long distance help to process information compared to the high IQ subjects. And the analogy is that so it's much more efficient to manufacture products locally than it is to have to depend on China and Australia or whatever to bring the goods in. So the more efficient brain is doesn't depend as much on the long distance connections because it has very efficient local information processing. It manufactures the goods it needs right here. It doesn't have to borrow from anything else. Now, I thought I would spend a little bit of time on the brain surfer, and then I'll go back to the book. But there's two kinds of. We also have event-related potentials if you're interested in them. And so here we can look at different frequencies. We also phase shift and phase lock, and we can look at different Broadband areas or networks. We can take a look at the attention network dorsal. I can, now looking at theta, phase differences, look at coherence. And the goal here is to keep these things green. That's true, we need more colors. But you look at your brain here, you move this over to the subject's screen, and you can size it, change it, and do all kinds of great things to it. And the subject is supposed to keep this on all the time. If I change the Z-score, so it's pretty easy for this to happen. I'll go oh, there it goes. So I'll make it more difficult. Maybe I should go the other way.
I think you want to make it white, don't you?
Green. It's positive, it's green. It's yellow and red. Green is good, you're within the threshold.
Oh, okay.
Yellow
Are you
is
doing
between the normal range and
Surface
the,
1 or 2?
This is 1, Brain Surfer 1.
One.
1. This one is 1. So let me go down. So now you can see in that range 1 to 3, you want it to be on. Go down to 2.
So they're
So
discrete rewards as well.
no,
Aren't there? Is there a reward count?
oh, not on this one.
Oh,
The second one there is. We also have, they have a symptom checklist, but there's Broadband areas. So you want it to be, let's see.
How would you advise someone to, between the use of Brain Surfer 1 and Brain Surfer 2?
I'll show that in a minute, so you'll see. So here, there's no colors because he's not getting anything. A little bit. In which case you need to lower this one. So you want to get him in this range for her, and you can look at cross hemispheres. So you can look at just part of the brain. And you can look at all of them. So you can play around with that. So that's the first Brain Surfer we put together. The second one, Brain Surfer 2. And it has more information. It has the scores, the percentage of metrics at threshold. It has session rounds. It has progress chart. So it's a little bit more sophisticated. Problem is when we wrote this, the code, the computations required did not allow us to put as many networks in as we wanted to.
You mean 1 versus 2?
Yeah, 2 was too burdensome to begin session. But it's here you want to keep it green.
So are you saying there's more hubs and networks in Brain Surfer 1 versus 2?
Yeah, than 2. But you got a symptom checklist. You can do all the same things that you did with discrete neurofeedback. But this is brain-computer interface. And this is 250 milliseconds. It's a shorter one. It's 125. Goes down to 31 milliseconds. It's averaging the EEG in real time. This one. And the goal here is to keep it green. And if I, let's see, go up here.
You find the upper Z-score range, do you change that when someone has a really wide deviation?
Yeah, you look at the Z-scores using NeuroGuide, so you get an idea of what the range of the Z-scores are in a given network, and then you set your thresholds accordingly. So he has a lot between 3 and 5 standard deviations. But what we want is to get him down to 1 standard deviation, and let's say 2. So he doesn't have as many, but he wants to make that green. So that's his goal. And you can see the session round, the amount of time, the scores, all that kind of information is there. As you can see how this thing changed. And so he's getting 60% rewards at every moment of time. Then you can see the z-scores in real time here. And these are instantaneous z-scores.
And here it is counting rewards.
Yeah. And we also have another Loretta method. Because we have event markers and in our website, this is the second video under YouTube videos. But we have a bitmap screen capture. I didn't show that, did I? I don't think earlier, but we also had Neural Navigator and also Loretta, regular Loretta, time domain capture. So let's say let me make sure I got it. Yeah. Look at the theta frequency band. And now this allows us to look at events in the brain millisecond by millisecond, or sample, whatever sample rate is. So it's a time domain capture. And it's especially good for epilepsy or any sharp wave, because you can identify where is it coming from. Start just before the spike is in the record, and then march through the spike, and you'll see, it's coming from the hippocampus, right temporal lobe, whatever. So I'm going to go here because I want to see what this is. There's time point 65. And you can see what's happening there. I'm going to go to connectivity, get the networks, reduce the increase the transparency of the cortex. And then I'm going to look at this peak here. And I'm looking at coherence. And I can look at this peak. You can see it's the left temporal lobe. The head of this. The right is okay. So that focal event is in next at this point. And the network I'm using, we go to networks. The dorsal attention network. So you can, now you can use your, you can just march through these. I can change the time scale. So I can go through the record. And so, as I mentioned, it's good for specific instances of time and for events that are not normal. So you can localize where the abnormal event happened. Neurologists need to, or neurosurgeons need to see this so they can go further and then evaluate the efficacy of the anti-epileptic medication that they give.
So you go under view to NeuroNavigator time domain capture.
Yeah,
And you plug NeuroNavigator separately.
you just click on that. And I'll do it again so you can see it.
Click on one.
On here, I'll close it. And I got a clear selection. I'm going to go to view, but I've already done it. So I just have to, after I selected it, then I drag my mouse over it. Then I launch the NeuroNavigator for the section I just selected. And then you go millisecond by millisecond through that selection to look at where's that event coming from. You know, you can go through the whole record if you want. And you can also use movie. I'm not sure if movie will work on this one, but we'll see. It may crash.
What do you mean? You can use movie.
Up here is movie. Right? And it will,
Save that clip. Save that selection.
yeah, it'll start at the beginning of the selection. And it'll march through it. Let's set it up so we can see connectivity, center voxel. We'll make put the cortex in, but make it more transparent. And then we'll get the control out of the way and click start. Should work. Looks like it's not. Oh, wait a minute, it is, yeah. Yeah, it is.
I got it.
What's it doing in the frequency domain? Looping every second or?
No,
You told it which band?
yeah, I should have.
Loops to the first frequency to the last frequency in the amount of seconds you choose to. So it starts from 1 hertz all the way to 3.
For the entire selection?
Yeah,
Okay.
One frequency at a time.
no, I'm sorry, it's point by point.
It's-
99, no, it's point by
It's point by point.
Yeah.
It's time point by
All
time point.
frequencies at each second.
No, the selected frequency you have. So
Oh,
we're
you
at,
have to select a specific frequency?
yeah, you do. It goes time point by time point. See, you select the frequency when you launch the time domain. So you're at
So I'm going to close it.
It's not, we should mark it on here.
Yeah.
Are you selecting a frequency band?
You select a frequency band. So
Okay,
I
so
want
it's
to
not
look
like I
at
don't have to-
all the data.
I don't have to look at 30
No, you look at,
separate hertz, right?
No.
Single pins. Okay. So it's a band.
So it defaults in delta, it looks like.
right, but you
And then you
select
can
the one
select
you
which
want,
one.
and then it'll go through each of those frequencies.
Okay. And it looks like you do gamma here too.
Yeah. You want to have a sharp spike.
Yeah, you use raw scores for that. And so, and we're moving through here. So we take a single point in time.
I'm just thinking it'd be nice to make some movies out of this and, you know, give them to people so they can see their brain.
And so you can start the movie. This is time point 92. And there's 99 points that I select, or this blue line goes at the 99 points. I have it at 2 second window, so it's short. So it's going through the different frequencies. At this instant, well, it's moving. So you can see,
That's going through the time sequence.
it's going through the time sequence at that frequency.
Now, when you're good at using this, is it obvious which frequency you should look at?
It
Or,
depends on what you're looking at.
Yeah, when you do the surface, just look at the EEG, you can see, well, yeah, theta at 4 hertz is really, or at 13 hertz is 5 standard deviations. So you can focus on that frequency. Now, this is time point by time point.
What paroxysmal theta burst, you want to see where it's coming from, and spiking rate,
Localizes seizure focus.
So your neurologist associate may be interested if there's any epilepsy, you can drill down on it, because that's the purpose of this, is really to look at the epileptic origin, how far out they go.
And you can only do bands. You can't do individual frequencies.
Yeah, I don't even see where the band is.
Yeah, we should label it, if you pick it in the beginning.
Yeah,
you
in the
before you
very
launch.
beginning when you
Well, we
launch it.
should put it on here, just so
Yeah.
you know what you're looking at.
So when you launch it, you select, this is delta band.
but then if you want to switch now, do you have to close it and then relaunch?
Close it and reopen.
That's a modification we can make to this. So that's the time domain capture that's useful for evaluating very specific events. And then you clear your selection. So now, of course, there's Neurostat. I didn't spend a lot of time on that, but here's how you launch Navistat, which you can do. You have to create an individual analysis file first, .nga. You can look at descriptive statistics, mean and standard deviation, absolute differences between, if you have an independent t-test or paired t-test, percent differences pre and post treatment, let's say. That's for groups, and then you can do the same for an individual. And then you can do Loretta statistics. You have to first create a .lia file. And then you can do group analysis with Loretta. And then you got your statistics, t-test, p-values. You can do transformed or non-transformed of raw values, take the square root. We do that because it creates a bell-shaped curve. And you got descriptive, skewness, kurtosis, a lot of information here. And group statistics. And then, of course, you got Navistat. Let me see if I launch Navistat. And we went through this already, so but that's how you do it. It's in NeuroGuide under statistics, under Neurostat. Now, under analysis, just so we're familiar with it, we can look at the Key Institute Loretta. So if I can move my mouse and look at raw scores or z-scores. Now, this is an internal NeuroGuide that's special for Carl and myself and the team there. So you won't see 4-channel, 6-channel, all that stuff. But you can look at coherence, phase differences, phase shift, phase lock, phase slope index, cross-frequency coherence. As you were saying, cross-frequency is really important, which it allows you to evaluate the cross-frequency. And then you got the Brain Surfer Network Viewer. Come on. Close Navistat. I think it crashed. Trying to go to page 82. Pretty slow. I wanted to emphasize again how important cross-frequency is, including cross-frequency phase shift and phase lock. The ultra slow is really glia and blood. There is no EG at this frequency. And you'll see that infra-slow stuff on the ISNR forum. That's not EEG. It's blood flow. It's real slow, 0.001, 0.0001. And the brain is always operating at a higher frequency. But there is the frequency from 0.05 to 4 hertz, the slow cortical potentials, and that's real. And that's a very large population of neurons will oscillate very slowly. The size is huge. It's particularly in the frontal lobes. Anybody know about the contingent negative variation? Anybody learn that? If you have intent to move, then your brain depolarizes massively in the frontal lobes. You just get everything ready. Imagine Michael Jordan playing basketball. His intent is to get to that basket. And so he'll have this big depolarization of his frontal lobes. It'll be real slow. But as he gets up to the basket, and this guy comes over with his arm to block him, he puts the ball in his left hand, then puts it in right at the last second. But But you got to get ready for all possibilities. So that's the readiness potential, slow cortical potential. And it's in that range. Now, the limbic system is oscillating through the reticular formation, through the hippocampus and the various pacemakers that are in the limbic system around between 4 and 9 hertz. And the cortex is 22 to 300 hertz. That's where it's going to really high frequencies. But these parts are all cross frequency coupled, as I was mentioning. Now, this band here, the alpha band, roughly 10 to 20, a little over 20, is what the resources are that can be selected at a given moment of time to accomplish a given task. And so the resources are sort of a bridge. The alpha is very important, and this mid-range beta for resources to be available to be allocated to form connections between the limbic system, reticular formation, and the cortex. At a given moment of time, some of these neurons get exhausted, some are committed, and so there's a big supply that cross-frequency coupled to.
Now, are we able to target that 0.05 to 4 with the CFC?
No, we found we do 1 hertz because we found that at less than 1 hertz would be this big DC shift, and it would go off the screen. We couldn't really control it properly, so we had to limit it to 1 hertz.
But we can go in at 1 hertz. And
Yeah, you can see 1 hertz, and you can still see these slower things. But it's just not as it just wiped out our system.
And that's coming up in the CFC that you're going to be doing? Crossfield coupling?
No, we can't. We can never go less than 1 hertz with Z-scores, for sure.
No, so 1-4 still
Is a
falls in
band.
that range.
Yeah, that's a band, right.
And you're saying that that's not EEG.
No, 1 to 4 is.
Well, I understand typically it's delta.
Yeah, it's delta, it's EEG. I said we can't go to 0.05 because it just created too much artifacts, so people could not use NeuroGuide. So that meant no NeuroGuide for you guys.
Right. But you were saying that blue band there was also a slow cortical potential?
Let me go to page 82. Yeah, the slow cortical potential is between 0.05 and 4 hertz. Typically, that's how it's defined.
How do we target that? That's what I'm asking.
Oh, just you can't do 0.05, but you can do 1 to 4.
Okay.
We just had to limit it at 1. So yeah, you can do 1 hertz, whatever you want. 2 hertz, 3 hertz, 4 hertz. But the limbic system is primarily oscillating at 4 to 9. And we don't do and we do have in NeuroGuide a special thing. Let's see if I can show it. We have what's called the dynamic bispectrum. And here we're less than, we're in the the very, very low frequencies for this. And let me see if I got,
So under bispectrum, you go where?
here's phase reset. Yeah, you go to view, dynamic bispectrum, and I selected phase reset. Default is delta, so I can look at theta. I can spread that out. Now you're actually looking at the phase reset.
Now, how do I interpret this?
Well, this is phase locking when it's flat like this. Now this is a recruitment, a global recruitment with respect to FP1. So FP1, for example, and P3 recruit. And you should look, don't worry about the direction of this. So they just recruited a bunch of neurons between the two of them. They locked them in, and then they let them go and got another group. And they're continually doing this. That's phase shift and phase lock. So phase lock is the flat line here. Phase shift is these things. That's the first derivative. First derivative is 0 here, and it has some value when there's a change. It's the rate of change. And you can see the spectrum here.
It doesn't matter where it's shifting.
No, here's P4, for example, with respect to other parts of the brain. There's P3 with respect to other parts of the brain.
Is there any relationship to first?
No, this is really phase shift and phase lock, but it's a good question. Burst metrics, let's see, is report. Here are the burst metrics. And it's really from the surface. So you're looking at what's the duration of a burst and different frequency bands. It's interesting, but again, drilling down inside the skull, looking at the hubs is where you really want to be. And whatever the metric is less important than drilling down. And we also have this dynamic, which I was showing earlier, I think, where you can look at phase shift and phase lock. We straighten phase, essentially phase, it will, if it keeps changing, and so you get this artifact in it. And so we have two different ways to look at it. And I'm going to use the color maps. And
So the dynamic bispectrum, I noticed that you were able to change which band you would have.
yeah,
Okay, I see how you.
yeah, and you can do that here too. But this is about the speed of consciousness, like this.
And is there any way of interpreting what you're actually looking at?
Well, this is, this is raw scores. And he has a problem right here in the right parietal region. He was struck by a bat, this guy. So you can see it in these different frequency bands. And you can see how it changes. Now we can look at it as z-scores.
How did you pull those maps inside?
Which, these here?
Correct.
I click view, dynamic JTFA. And I'm should look at theta, so that's where he's deviant, and here are z-scores. But this is time point by time point. So I think I've brought you guys through practical everything, and you're still awake. And you can get a report of the bispectrum. But the bispectrum is important. I mean, it's really what's important is location, location, location. And if you want to use the bispectrum for a location, but this is not at the level of Brodmann areas, it's at the surface only. So you really want to dig down and find out those problem areas that are not doing what they're supposed to do. So I think you guys, I can see smoke coming out of your ears. It's probably time for us to say goodbye. And you guys can rest up. It's still nice outside. You can go swimming. And then tomorrow we'll continue a little bit with this, but pretty much it's going to be hands-on stuff. And Emin and Sid will be here to help with that. I will be too, but we'll get the 2 volunteers wired up and we'll learn practical, hands-on, how to get good quality data. So once you get good quality data, there's all kinds of tools you can use to do wonderful things. But if you have crappy data to begin with, none of these tools are useful. So recording hygiene is what we're going to emphasize tomorrow. So I want to thank everybody who's been watching virtually, and we're going to save this recording and it'll be available for everybody. And you also will have access to you have to email me for access to the ebook that I was showing as just part of this whole training episode. So don't hesitate to contact me, or I'll find a way to contact you. We have your email address.
Yeah, we'll have Rebecca send it.
Have Rebecca do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.